Hello friends, for today's video we're going to be looking at some anticipated fantasy releases for the second half of the month of July. If you're looking for anticipated releases for the first half, I do have a part 1, so I'll have that linked. For today we're going to be looking starting at July 15th, books that will be released on that date all the way through the end of the month. And of course, as always, I'll have projected release dates, all relevant information, and pre-order links in the description bar down below. Jumping straight into it, the first two that I'm going to mention are much more on the cozy fantasy side. One of them would be the Enchanted Greenhouse. This is by Sarah Beth Durst, who has written a lot of various different books, and I've read and reviewed quite a number of them, so I'll have those linked because I do feel like from one to the next, the stories and the settings and even the subgenres change. So even if you don't end up loving one by this author, there's still a decent chance that you'll like something else by them. And one thing that I can say is true throughout is that the world building is always really well done, very exceptional. But the book, The Enchanted Greenhouse, takes place within the same world as The Spell Shop, which is how we know it is still a cozy fantasy story. And I don't want to say too much, I don't want to read too much about this one just because it seems like there's going to be some, barely there probably, but there's going to be maybe some tie-ins to The Spell Shop. I don't think necessarily it's one where you have to read The Spell Shop first, as it's not a direct sequel, but it does seem like this is going to be a world where various standalones are written within it, and it might be recommended to read The Spell Shop first. Once I've picked this one up, I can more accurately assess that, but I don't want to look at the synopsis in case it does, or I should say I don't want to read off the synopsis in case it reveals anything for The Spell Shop. But The Spell Shop was one of those where I believe in the Goodreads Choice Award nominees, it was nominated specifically for the fantasy romance category. And I know for myself, and I think a lot of other people too, thought that was slightly inaccurate. Not that it doesn't appeal to fantasy romance readers, and there was a romantic subplot, but it much more comfortably, in my opinion at least, fits within cozy fantasy. Something like Travis Baldry's works, I think, are closer parallels to that than a lot of other fantasy romance books I can think of, but it was very, very cute and very cozy. The setup for that one is you followed this young woman who ended up escaping this library that she worked at as the library was burning, and she just kind of instinctively grabbed a bunch of the books. And then when she left, she realized if the rebellion failed and the previous people stayed in power, you are not allowed to take the magical tomes from the library, and they have severe punishments for people who do. So she kind of goes into hiding, but she also has no way of knowing who ended up coming through that rebellion, so she's just kind of trying to keep a secret what she's done, and she ends up returning to where she grew up, which is really secluded, and everybody knows everybody, so of course everybody starts kind of getting in her business, and she's somewhat processing the loss of her parents and loneliness and trying to find her place, while also maybe taking a peek a little bit at some of the magical tomes that she took from the library and exploring what they have to offer. And this one, it seems, is going to also explore something around that same timeline. The other cozy fantasy book that is projected to be released on that same day would be A Witch's Guide to Magical Innkeeping. The release date for this one changed a number of times, so fingers crossed it doesn't change again, but I very much enjoyed The Very Secret Society of Irregular Witches by this author. The setup for this one says, Sarah Swan used to be one of the most powerful witches in Britain. Then she resurrected her great aunt Jasmine from the very recently dead, lost most of her magic, befriended a semi-villainous talking fox, and was exiled from her guild. Now she slightly reluctantly and just a bit grumpily helps Jasmine run an enchanted inn, where she deals with her quirky guest shenanigans, tries to keep said talking fox in check, and longs for the future that seems to be lost to her. But then she finds out about an old spell that could hold the key to restoring her power. Enter Luke Larson, handsome and icy magical historian who arrives on a dark winter evening and just might know how to unlock the spell's secret. Luke has absolutely no interest in getting involved in the madcap goings-on of the inn and is definitely not about to let a certain bewitching innkeeper past his walls, so no one is more surprised than he when he agrees to help Sarah with her spell. Worse, he might actually be thawing. Running an inn, reclaiming lost magic, and staying one step ahead of the watchful guild is a lot for anyone, but Sarah Swan is about to discover that she doesn't have to do it alone, and that the weird, wonderful family she's made might be the best magic of all. It's so cheesy and cute in its synopsis, so it definitely seems like it's very much leaning into the cozy fantasy and also charming love story side of things, which I think part of what made the other story so well loved as well is that mix of cozy fantasy and contemporary romance. Not all the ones on the list, just to be clear, are like that today. Not everything in July necessarily is fantasy, romance leaning, or contemporary or cozy. But I will say this next one does still fall into the maybe leans romantasy category, and that would be in the veins of The Drowning. After this, we'll get some others as well, but the setup for this one says, the monster is always slain. Imogen Nell is in hiding from a cruel kingdom that believes sirens are monstrous, blood-hungry creatures, hiding from a king and his captain who viciously hunt her kind, hiding from her own alluring abilities. By keeping herself from the sea, Imogen's bloodlust is dulled and her black wings remain concealed beneath her skin. When a neighboring king comes to visit, Imogen can no longer hide. He knows precisely what she is, and he believes she can save their kingdoms from an even greater monster. But Imogen's power threatens to violently reveal itself, and the two form a blood bond that protects them both. They flee together, traversing waters teeming with the undead. As the lines between duty to their people and desire for each other begin to blur, Imogen worries her ancestral powers may not be enough to kill who hunts her. The only way to defeat a monster may be to become one herself. I think it's kind of interesting because I could be mistaken, but it feels like a lot of these July releases feel kind of more fall leaning or October leaning. This one in particular, the fact that there's the undead within the sea and you get some of these monsters, that definitely to me has more of the fall leanings to it. Not, of course, that people have to pick things up by mood reading based on times of the year, but I almost wonder if there's a tactical reason behind this, and the idea being that it'll come out in the month of July and then really kind of pick up. People will start reading it and they'll start recommending it come the fall season. Not that that is necessarily relevant. I just always like to kind of assess when things are coming out, and because doesn't it kind of seem like the Innkeeping one and this one both lean more toward the kinds of things people would recommend in the fall, but if it comes out in the fall, then it's not going to be put on people's anticipated releases. So it kind of feels like a strategic move and playing into the ways that social media and recommendations online play into how well a book is, how likely it is to be successful is what I'm trying to say. Anyway, like I said, that's slightly irrelevant. I do like the general idea of that story, though, and I don't feel like sirens are as explored these days within fantasy as they could be, so excited for that one's release. Now moving into July 22nd. The one book for this date would be Arcana Academy. It is by Elise Kova, who has written quite a lot of fantasy before and definitely seems like an author who likes to dip their toes in different fantasy subgenres. So one, as an example, was more steampunk gaslamp. I've also read some that are more fantasy romance, or more so romantasy, I would say, than fantasy romance. So it'll be interesting to see what this one is. Seems like there's maybe an academic side of things. It says, Clara Greysword has survived the underworld of Eclipse City through thievery, luck, and a whole lot of illegal magic. After a job gone awry, Clara is sentenced to a lifetime in prison for inking tarot cards, a rare power reserved for practitioners at the elite Arcana Academy. Just when it seems her luck has run dry, the Academy's enigmatic headmaster, Prince Kalis, offers her an escape for a price. Kalis believes that Clara, however you want to say it, is the perfect tool to help him steal a tarot card from the king and use it to recreate an all-powerful card long lost to time. In order to conceal her identity and keep her close, Kalis brings Clara to Arcana Academy, introducing her as the newest first-year student and his bride-to-be. Thrust into a world of arcane magic and royal intrigue, where one misstep will send her back to prison or worse, Clara finds that the prince she swore to hate may not be what he seems. But can she risk giving him power over the world and her heart, or will she take it for herself? If you're wondering, Luna Bear has entered the room, so I am slightly distracted now. But it seems like there is a borderline hidden identity with the idea that this character has to go into the school and pretend to be one of the students. Fake betrothal, it seems as well, but is it going to end up being that fake? You know, one of those scenarios, but mixed with the idea of like street thief, fish out of water, and dark academia. It seems like a lot of mixes there, but that could make for something really unique and really original. So I am going to be keeping my eyes out on this one and try to pick it up if I can relatively soon to when it's going to come out. And also another one that feels like it's more of a fall book So I think there's something to my theory, or maybe not. Maybe it's a whole lot of nonsense. Now moving to July 29th, the first one for this date would be Silvercloak, and its synopsis says, 2 decades ago, the Blood Moons ruthlessly murdered Saffron Kilaron's parents, destroying her idyllic childhood. Hell-bent on revenge, she lies her way into Silvercloak Academy, the training ground for her city's elite order of detectives, with a single goal: to bring the Blood Moons to justice. But when Saph's deception is exposed, rather than being cast out, she's given a rare opportunity to go undercover and tear the Blood Moons down from the inside. Descending into a world where pleasure and pain are the most powerful currencies, Saph must commit some truly heinous deeds to keep her cover and her new life. Not only are there rival gangs and sinister smuggling rings to contend with, but there's also her growing feelings for the Kingpin's tortured son with his vicious pet, Fallow Wolf, his dark past, and the curious prophecy foretelling his death at Saffron's hands. With each day testing her loyalties further, Saph finds her web of lies becoming harder to spin. And when one false step could destroy everything and everyone she's ever loved, the detective who's dedicated her life to vengeance just might die for it. I like the idea of, not only the idea of a detective within a fantasy world, because we are seeing more of that, but I like the idea of an undercover detective specifically, because something like The Tainted Cup, it's not necessarily a story where the characters are pretending to be someone they're not in order to get information. So the idea of somebody going undercover in a fantasy world reminds me the tiniest bit of some of Vin's plot progression within The Final Empire, the first book, except for rather than if you haven't read that, I don't want to spoil things, but she has to infiltrate a different area, we'll say, and it seems like this character has to kind of go into the underground sort of feeling, and I really like the idea of that. I'm also, I don't know what it is, but that cover really does draw my attention in. A lot of beautiful covers we've been very spoiled, I would say, this year with some fantastic cover artists lending their talents to the stories that we pick up. This one just really catches my eye. I really have high hopes for this one. I hope we really like it. It is the first in a series. The series name is the Silvercloak Saga, so fingers crossed, because it seems like it has a lot of promise. We also have a sequel to A Study in Drowning, and that would be A Theory of Dreaming. I am avoiding seeing anything to do with the synopsis for this one because it's a sequel, and I did enjoy the first one, so I'm curious to see how we expand off of the events of that first book, because the first one does conclude in a way where it could stand on its own and be fine, but there is the potential for a sequel, which it seems the author has decided to follow through with. So A Theory of Dreaming, the projected release date currently is July 29th. That's all I'm going to say about that one. After that, we have Birth of a Dynasty. And this one already, its comp titles really intrigued me, as they weren't books I typically would associate with each other, nor are they ones that I see pointed to as comp titles very often, and those would be She Who Became the Sun and Children of Blood and Bone. So that was kind of an interesting mix. And I find that when it's more specific like that, either the book is so unique that marketing is really grasping at straws trying to find something that it's similar to, or it ends up being truly like a fascinating blend of those two stories. And also usually that means it's slightly less on trend because of the fact that it's not just Fourth Wing, or it's not just one of the other books that ends up being a comp title for so many things these days. The synopsis says, "We shall not forgive, we shall not forget, we will have our vengeance." After witnessing the massacre of everyone he's ever known and loved, Mukuru Mukundi, the sole surviving member of the high noble house Mukundi of Madada, vows revenge. Mukuru flees to a small village where he hides under the guise of a farm boy, Khalil Rossi, unaware that the real Khalil father is the bloodthirsty general of Zenzil's army, and under the direction of the king's scheming son, Prince Ephiam, who was responsible for the murder of Mukuru's people. When an imposter claiming to be Mukuru shows up in the village, the real Mukuru, now Khalil, must bide his time amongst his enemies, pretending to be everything that he hates in order to get revenge. In another part of the country where giants roam free, young Zecora, the only daughter of Lord Namani, knows nothing of political intrigue. She wants little more than to be a warrior, but a well-known prophecy places places too much potential power on her small shoulders. And as far as Prince Effiam and the king know, she is the only living threat to their dynasty ruling forever. However, when a messenger arrives to invite Zecora to stay at the palace, her family is not in a position to refuse. Before she is taken away, she begins the Rite of Blessing, a magical inheritance that she will need to learn how to use, but that may also bring the world one step closer to the completion of the prophecy that Prince Effiam so fears. Between scheming ladies at court, backstabbing princes on the prowl, and paranoid kings, Mukuru and Zecora must do what they can, no matter how terrible, to save their people and claim vengeance for their families. But they are just two young people against an entire kingdom and a prophecy destined to thwart their dreams, and the last thing they can do is trust anyone, even each other. Definitely seems like a lot of scheming, definitely seems like a lot of really rich and lush world building. Also seems like a setting that we aren't typically seeing these days in fantasy. So for all those reasons, and also just the synopsis in general, that one definitely has my attention. Last for today, we have the book Soul of Shadow. This one seems to be a little more of like a modern fantasy setting. It says, Charlie Hudson is just trying to survive junior year, navigating the halls of school and the chaos of parties like a ghost. But her world is about to become seriously transformed, like world-shifting altered, when a classmate mysteriously disappears into the forest, leaving only a pair of shoes and strange symbols carved into a tree. Drawn to the disappearances by forces she can't explain, she finds herself investigating the mysterious, alluring newcomer in town, Elias Everhart. With piercing eyes and a sharp wit, he dances around her questions, only intriguing her further. Elias has a secret, more than one. But what Charlie doesn't know is that those secrets will lead her to a place she never imagined. A world hiding in plain sight, filled with enchanting mythic beings, hidden dangers, and a first love fated to fall apart. And it does say that it seems to have some Norse inspirations as well, so if you're somebody who's a fan of that, it would seem like maybe that has to do with some of the mysterious other things going on. And again, that one was called Soul of Shadow. That concludes, though, part 2 for some anticipated fantasy releases for the month of July. As stated before, I did do a part 1, so I'll have that linked, and I'll have all relevant information in the description bar down below. If there was anything I didn't include in the books that are released within this time period from July 15th through the end of the month, feel free to mention those. Thanks so much for watching, though. I hope you have a great rest of your day, and I'll see you later.